Hey everybody, it's great to be with you. Brad Macbeth here from The Simple Plan with this week's edition of The Simple Plan Live. Today we're going to be looking at what exactly is a financial plan? What does it take to get one? What do they look like? And do you really need one? One of the really interesting things is that almost every Canadian does not have a true financial plan. There are not many people who have financial plans out there. It's a low number. And that is really a blight on the industry of all financial advice because, of course, most Canadians have some form of, or many Canadians have some form of investment. We just ended RSP season this week, so of course a lot of people are contributing there. People have tax-free savings accounts, all sorts of investments, but they don't have a financial plan. And interestingly, many might think they do. Probably not a majority, but a strong minority would think they do. In the many years that I've been doing this, I've asked many clients, I've asked many prospects, clients, people I've just met with, do you have a financial plan? And many of them will say yes. They're a little hesitant, but they say yes. And then when I ask them, well, can you show it to me? Many can't. And those that do produce either a statement for an RSP or something like that, or they come out with a document which is kind of a part of the Know Your Client process advisors are supposed to go through, which is really an investment risk tolerance document, which is just a bunch of questions that aren't even very good at trying to assess how people feel about the riskiness of investments they want to invest into. In the 20, is it 20? It's coming up on 20 years that I've been doing this. It's 19 this year. 19 years I've been doing this. Not once has anyone that I've ever met that I haven't worked with before ever produced a financial plan. Not once. It's never happened. And the statistics back that up. Now, I want to, we're going to get into the show and take a look at what a financial plan is and why you should have one and all that good stuff. I want to just remind you of our sponsor, the Simple Plan Community, and invite you to join. It's a Facebook community, a private Facebook community for the Simple Plan on Facebook. And we share there many practices, insights, conversations, tips, and support that help everybody make the most of the money that they have in life and to grow that money in an effective way. And by joining that community, you're not only going to get access to all of that, you can bring your own questions in there and we'll happily answer them. And even more importantly, you'll have a community of like-minded people to walk with. And we are going through some challenging times. So having like-minded people to walk with is an exciting prospect. In fact, let me show you, I forgot to set this up. Let me show you what one of the things we're all experiencing as we enjoy what's going on all around us in these very interesting and challenging times. Where did that go? Oh, did I lose that? No. Oh, I appear to have misplaced that. Let me just add it in here quickly so you can have a look. This is brand new today. Never happened before. All very exciting. Oh, I guess we're not going to upload that. Oh well. That's unfortunate because it's pretty compelling stuff I wanted to show you. Let me see if I can bring it up over here. Pretty sure I can. So obviously we're living in extraordinary times right now. There's amazing, remarkable, unparalleled, extremely challenging things going on all over the place. And one of these is that we are experiencing inflation like we have not experienced in a long, long time. And as part of that, here's the latest sign out of Vancouver. Yes, there it is. It crossed there today. $2 a liter. $2.09 for gasoline, regular gasoline in Vancouver. And that is the highest price for gasoline in North America. But it's, very unfortunate that that's what's going on. But, we are experiencing some really nasty inflation. And the background behind that is this appalling invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That's not the only factor. Of course, we were already experiencing significant inflation. And if you want to hear more about this, I talked about it some last week in our broadcast. We're living in very different and challenging times. We've got the global pandemic. We've got the war in Ukraine, and we have inflation taking off. And this week, for the first time in a long time, the Bank of Canada raised interest rates, which is their standard move to combat inflation. Now, whether that's going to have much effect remains to be seen, because raising interest rates is certainly not going to bring the price of oil back down. Russia is a major exporter of oil to the world, and so that turmoil is already driving the price of oil up globally, and will continue to do so, I imagine. And our supply chain problems that are driving some of this inflation, and our labor shortage, which is also driving inflation. None of these things are really going to be affected by interest rates, particularly. So we're going to have higher interest rates, which of course just adds more to inflation. It's going to be challenging times for a while ahead, folks. So hopefully you're far enough down the road with your financial planning that you've got financial emergency fund in place and plans to manage through difficult financial times. That's part of what the whole financial planning process is about. And so now I want to cut over to what exactly is a financial plan. Let's take a look at that. I'm just going to start by showing you an actual financial plan, and we'll go from there. So this is a financial plan. It's the kind of plan we build for clients. The data that's in this plan is not real data. It's not about a real person, but it is about an individual. I kept it at an individual level, though we generally do these plans for couples, so we can blend incomes and optimize taxes among the couples. So this is what a financial plan looks like. Now, there are many types of financial plans, but you'll get the gist of what kind of things are contained in a financial plan. So the first thing that you would have, and this page is blank because our client, Jen, is not a real person, is goals and objectives. And that's really where you have to begin. You start with your blank sheet of paper about what your goals and objectives are for your financial future. They will be wide-ranging, most likely. They will include things, might include things like just paying off your debt. They might include things like even getting on a budget to begin with. Those are really two of the first biggest steps of getting your finances in order and having a financial plan. The next step after building yourself a cash flow plan or budget and getting yourself a debt freedom plan, how are you going to get rid of debt? The next step is a financial security plan. We've talked about all this through our past 7 weeks of overall financial planning that we've been looking at live here. And part of that financial security plan is having an emergency fund in place for unplanned emergencies like runaway inflation. Another factor is making sure that your financial security is secured against items that you can't manage financially. So things like a serious illness or a death in the family, especially for someone who earns an income in the family. This is what we have things like life insurance and disability insurance for. Those are all part of your financial security. But when we get to kind of more numeric financial objectives, we're going to look at things like some people are saving a down payment for a house. Some people are planning for their children's education. Most of us, the core thing we think about when we think about financial planning and investing is retirement. So you put together a plan for retirement, and we're going to see how that particularly in this type of financial plan we're looking at today, what that looks like, the many components of that. And with all of that comes tax optimization so that we pay as little taxes as necessary. Now, we have to pay tax here in our country, and that's fine. You know, taxes pay for a lot of really good things we have going on in our country. You know, maybe we pay too much tax, but we are well blessed with our way of life here in Canada, and taxes are a necessary, though sometimes unpleasant aspect of making that happen. But we don't need to pay more than the tax we're required to pay, and there are many ways we can optimize the way that we arrange our affairs in order to reduce the amount of tax that we owe. So that's a significant part of any major financial plan. So we go from goals and objectives, and every plan is based on assumptions. And so you see these are the typical kinds of things that are involved in a projection. We have to assume what dates we're talking about. For this particular person, we're running the plan to the end of December 2085. We've assumed, and this is what I've been doing standard, an inflation rate of 2.5%, which for the most part over the last few years has been higher than inflation. So it seemed like a conservative approach. I like to use conservative assumptions so that we don't end up with any nasty surprises from our planning down the road when things don't pan out because we were too aggressive in our planning. But it's looking like that inflation rate might have to change because inflation affects the price of everything going forward. I'll tell you that $2 a liter gasoline is going to affect the price of pretty much everything because almost everything is either made from or shipped by the use of fossil fuels. Inflation rate for Canada Pension Plan, CPP, and inflation rate for Old Age Security, or OAS. That 2.1, that is actually the rate that has been the average over the last 20 years in Canada. They raise the amount, the benefit, every year. Oh, look at that, didn't turn the phone off. They raise the amount every year by what they calculate as the inflation rate. And so that's what's been going on the last 20 years. Maybe that's going to change going forward. But if that number changes, it will change slowly. Next, we have the province for tax purposes. So because taxation varies from province to province. And then we have our default rates of return that we use for our assumptions for investments. You can see there. And kind of the demographic assumptions or the personal assumptions for our client here, Jen. She's planning on retiring at the age of 60. She's going to start taking her CPP at age 60 and her OAS at age 65. You can start taking those at different ages, all the way up to age 70 for both of them. Those are the minimum ages, the earliest ages you can take CPP or OAS. And we wouldn't use a percent of maximum. I always like to get the actual numbers. You can get your own projected numbers for your Canada Pension Plan benefit from CRA, from my CRA. You just have to set up a login there. All right, and then we see our rates of return. We've got the home appreciation rate of 4%. And in this case, we actually included line of credit, which they're paying 17.5% on, and a mortgage interest rate. They have a mortgage at 2.75%. So those assumptions are really, the foundation of what this projection is all about. As you change those assumptions, of course, all the projections would change. And so we revisit this every year. Both we revisit where we're at in progress, and then we adjust the plan accordingly, both just at the kind of the balances level, but also we take a look at our assumptions. Do these assumptions still hold true, or do we need to adjust, such as we're talking about with inflation right now? And so we've talked before about one of the most important numbers that you should know about yourself is your net worth. And so we have the net worth projection. Here we have it in a chart. And it shows you, if you look over here at the very left where her net worth is smaller, it's going to grow to significantly higher over time. But this is inflation, this is not adjusted to today's dollars. So of course it looks like it's a fantastic increase in net worth, and it's a good one. But inflation, of course, will mean that $6 million in at Jen's age 99, which is 62 years from now, is definitely not going to be worth the same thing as $6 million is today. So we see she has a modest net worth here, and we see it's also comprised of her real assets, which is the black column. That would be her home. And the red is some debt. And so this blue dotted line is actually the line of her net worth. So while she has debt, of course, the blue dotted line is below the level of her total assets. Notice things build up. This little green bit of green, that's her tax-free savings account as she starts accumulating in that over time. Now, next, we want to show her after-tax spending. And so when we do planning for people, we can, but we generally don't get into the nitty-gritty of tracking their spending now. Now, we'll help them put together a cash flow and spending plan and all that, but we don't incorporate it into our financial plan particularly, just because it's a very complex number that's always shifting around. So the after-tax spending we really want to be most concerned about is what happens here at her age 60 when she takes her retirement. And because that's when it gets leveled off. What we're looking for is what is the maximum amount of income, after-tax income, that she can receive in order to fund her retirement. And we're going to try to level that so she has an equal level of income throughout retirement. Now you look at this and it doesn't look equal because it's going up every year, but it's actually only going up by that 2.5% rate of inflation. So the spending power that she has at age 60 will be the same for each year of her retirement, as long as that inflation rate is at 2.5%. And we really have to account for that inflation. Otherwise, if you don't, you'll see that what starts out as something in the order of, that looks like about $70,000. By the time she reaches age 100, has to be nearly $200,000 to have the same purchasing power. So if you don't adjust that for inflation and she only had the $70,000 throughout her retirement, she will be much, much poorer by the time she's 100 years old. Okay, so here's Jen's current net worth statement. And this is the foundation of how you want to measure what's going on. Because we think of life in terms of cash flow and income, but really your net worth is the measure that measures how you're doing financially. And so at this stage, Jen has $50,000 in what we call capital assets, and you can see those are all contained in a tax-free savings account. And then she has $486,000 in real assets, which real assets are things like real estate, tangible things like that. And then she has liabilities of $256,000, of which $17,000 is that line of credit, and $238,000 is her mortgage. So she has a net worth, that is what she owns, both these assets added together, less what she owes, her liabilities. Her net worth is $281,066. And we want to help her grow that throughout her life. And so we have the net worth projection, and you'll see that as time goes on, her net worth is going to increase with the combination of adding to her investments and appreciation in the value of her assets and paying down her debt because she's going to make mortgage payments and line of credit payments. By the end of 22, her net worth will have grown to $320,000. That's a pretty big jump, 281 to 320. That's about almost a $40,000 increase. That's about a 15%, a 14% increase in her net worth in a single year. That's good progress. And so, don't be intimidated by these big tables of numbers. This is just going, if we look at Jen's age, this is just projecting what her net worth is going to be each year as she heads toward age 100. In fact, you'll see how her she never actually, she only gets a small amount in non-registered assets. She does almost all her saving inside her tax-free savings account there. We see the value of her house going up year over year, her debt diminishing till she gets her mortgage paid out at age 63, and carries on from there. All the way through to age 100, where you'll notice that she has now exhausted her capital assets. So the theory is she will spend her last pennies out of her tax-free savings account in the year she turns 100, and presumably will pass away that year. Her real assets, which are just her house, at that point, now fasten your seatbelts. We're all accustomed to house inflation, but over long periods, this is big. Her house will grow to $6 million in value by the end of 2085. Now let's just go back and look. What was it worth? So it was worth $500,000 at the end of 2022. So it's gone, from $500,000 to $6 million in 63 years. All right, and so here's her net worth statement for her estate at the time that she passes away. So as we said, she'll have exhausted all her capital assets. Now, of course, nobody does that. You can't possibly plan that well so that you spend your last dime right before you expire at age 100. But her house, her real assets will be worth nearly $6 million. And that $6 million, none of that will be taxed because there'll be a bit of probate fee on it. I think, actually, you know what? I'm not sure that there will be. It depends. There could be. But in any event, that is not a taxable asset to her. So the estate will not have to pay tax. There may just be probate fees on that. And then the estate after tax is worth the $6 million. In real dollars, that means in terms of today's dollars, which 2022 dollars, it would be worth $1.26 million. So that will be the value of her estate when she passes away. Now, again, these are projections. This is not likely how it's going to unfold. It's not likely that Jen is going to be in the same house in 2085 when she dies at age 100 that she is in today in 2022. So she'll probably sell her house along the way. We also can make plans for that. We often do for people. We make it a part of their plan. Okay, let's figure that when you get to be age 75, you don't want to have the big house anymore, or maybe it's when you retire, or maybe whatever it is. And we account for all that. If you have multiple properties, we account for the taxes that have to get paid on that, all that stuff. All right, and so then we have the cash flow summary. This just shows what she's doing with her money year over year. Now, in 2022, at age 37, Jen has after-tax spending. Keep that in mind, that phrase, after-tax spending. So there's two things happening there. First off, taxes have already been paid. And secondly, it's spending money. So we have spending money after we've made our investments, after we've paid our debts. So this is the money, and that includes making our mortgage payments. So this is the money that's in her pocket to spend after paying her taxes, making her investments, and paying any bills or debts that she has in a given year. So that's the rough estimate. Now, of course, we don't get into breaking down how she spends that money, though we could, but we don't generally. We do help people with making plans around that where they need some assistance, but we don't incorporate it into the big plan. So she's got $26,000 in after-tax spending, and that's going to keep increasing. You can see her employment income here. It's increasing. I think probably I just set that by the rate of inflation, or 3% or something. And so we also see what she's paying in taxes and what she's paying in debt payments every year, and what she's contributing to her investments. You can also see her effective tax rate. So we want to arrange things in such a way, and she's kind of on what I would call the bubble here, whether it might be worthwhile to put a small amount into RSP. Possibly it would be at that level of income, because you could generate some additional, by using the same earned dollars, you could generate an additional reduction in taxes by contributing to an RSP, and then use that additional reduction in taxes to further fund your tax-free savings account. So you would get a little more there. That's probably one thing I would look at doing in this plan. All right, so let's fast forward down to Jen turns age 60. So we get to age 60 here. Jen's last year of employment, she's making $120,000. And it's age 60, so she's going to start drawing her CPP and her OAS. I don't know what your age is, but it's kind of a rude feeling when you get that first letter that says, hey, you're eligible to apply for your CPP if you want to. She's going to have taxes. That's going to be a relatively high tax here because she not only had her earned income, but she also received some OAS on top of that. And that's the last year she's going to contribute to her tax-free savings account. And she's going to pay 18% in her taxes there. Now, let's look, because Jen only contributed to a tax-free savings account, let's take a look when she hits age 61 at how things are going. Well, first off, and this is one of the key numbers, is she is going to have $41,000. That's in today's income. She's going to have $41,723 a year in after-tax spending. So that's about $3,500 a month. Now, that's after her mortgage is paid. She won't have any debts once her mortgage is paid, and she's not investing anymore. But that's just cash into her pocket, $3,500 a month, and her house is paid for. That includes her CPP and her old age security, her OAS. Well, actually, it does factor in her OAS payments, though they don't start until age 65. So we're leveling everything, even though there's different sources of income coming in at different times, so that she's got the same level of income throughout retirement, which is the equivalent of this, about $3,500 a month of after-tax money that she can just spend. Now, we've really well optimized this plan because she only contributed to the tax-free savings account. She's not paying any taxes. Her effective tax rate is 0 because her taxable income only gets to $12,719. That's the amount that she's receiving. Where is that money coming from? That's a good question. Oh, that's her CPP. Yes. That money's coming out of her CPP because that's taxable income. So that's it. So let's carry on and see how that goes. So as we carry on she gets into her mid-70s here, she's still got that $41,000. Now note, the equivalent of $41,000 in today's dollars by the time Jen turns 73, at that 2.5% rate of inflation, is going to be $101,000. She's going to need $101,000 in 2058 to have the same spending power as $41,723 today. So she's continuing to collect her CPP and OAS, taking money from her tax-free savings account. That year she's taking $69,679. And once again, her effective tax rate is still 0. So this is a very well-optimized tax plan. And then, now we're not adjusting her income or her spending. We could do that. We could say, well, yes, she's got this after-tax spending, but we're just going to recycle it back into an investment of some kind, part of it, because she's not going to spend it all. Because generally speaking, depends on your health, but when you retire, you may spend, let's use a number like age 80, could be 85, could be even earlier. You're going to stop spending as much as you spend in your earlier retirement years, say up to age 75, because your ability is going to diminish, as is your energy. So you're going to be less likely to travel as much. You may not engage in as many hobbies or as active hobbies. You know, you may only play golf once a week rather than 4 times a week, or all those things that factor into retirement and aging. So we could factor all those things in. Again, I kept it simple to look at this, but we do this all the time, putting together plans that we show all those variations. So you can really plan, or project right down to the penny what's going to happen on any given day. Now, you can project it, but of course things change. And that's why we review it. Every year, at minimum, once a year, we review these plans. We go over them in detail, reset and update all the numbers based on progress, re-examine with the clients, with you, how much, how things worked out with all the projections, how people are feeling. You know, people are, I can tell you, because I'm getting a lot of calls and inquiries right now, people are a lot more worried, fearful, wondering right now about many aspects of their finances that they weren't thinking about 6 months ago, and certainly not 2 years ago. You know, there's been a lot go on. The pandemic, the invocation of the Emergencies Act here in Canada for that brief period, and now the war in Ukraine and inflation all have people significantly worried. Not necessarily everybody's worried about all those things, but a lot of people are worried about one or more of those things. Which is also why we're here, because we just go back to the plan. We say, okay, here's our assumptions. How are those assumptions holding up now based on what's going on in the world? So that's what the plan looks like. Let me just give you a brief look at what the planning looks like. So this is the tool that we use, and you wouldn't, well, we could sit together and work on this, but it allows us to do things like say, well, let's imagine that we want to increase. So let's look for our magic number here. It's right there. This calculates it for us, 41,723. That's our levelized level of retirement income. So let's say, well, you know what? I've got my contributions going on here to my tax-free savings account. So you know what? Let's increase that. Let's say, well, you know what? I'm going to start with $10,000 and go from there. So I'm going to start at $10,000 a year. I'm going to copy that down till my age 59. I'm going to increase it by the rate of inflation because I figure I'm going to get a raise so I can increase what I'm investing. So I click yes. Okay, so let's say we start here at 71. We go to 10,000 starting next year. All right. And we have to update things here. And we run what's called our sustainable scenario from age 60. That's what gives us that levelized calculation of how much income we're going to be able to have, how much after-tax spending we're going to be able to have. So let's see, oops, that didn't update all the way down. Let's copy down to age 59. There we go. Oh, I see it's restricting us. Okay, because we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money. I can see that. We don't have money in our tax-free savings account. So we would need to create another account. So we're going to do that. Let's go create we'll create a new RSP. All right, whoops, no, get rid of that. And we go back to our planning page. And now, where's our RSP? We're going to add that $2,500 a year over here into an RSP. And so we've increased effectively we've increased our contributions to our investments by $2,500 a year. We'll run the sustainable scenario, age 60. All right. And so there we go, 47,762. So we've increased our outflow, the amount of income, the after-tax spending we're going to have by about $500 a month there in today's dollars. So, that's a nice tidy sum. We know that if we contributed an extra $2,500 a year for the next, how long are we here for? So that's for the next 22 years. So if we put another $2,500 a year aside for the next 22 years, we are going to receive an additional $500 a month every year until age 100. So yeah, that's all good stuff. Now you'll notice now what we've created though, if we die before age 100, is we've created a bit of a tax liability over here called tax on estate, because we now have the RSP that's accumulated some money. And if we were to pass away before we exhausted that money, that would pay out to, there would be tax owing on that, on the total amount. A lot of people don't recognize that with an RSP, or they find out too late. So if you die, let's say you've got $190,000 in your RSP here at age 61. If you pass away at that age, your RSP is, if you're not married, if you don't have someone you're married to that you can pass that amount on to, that $191,000 is going to be deemed to have been sold and be fully taxable as income. And so you're going to pay $54,552 on that in tax. So these are all the things we think about when we're putting together this plan. So there are many, many more things we can factor in as well. What I've shown you is relatively the simple version of what goes on. Excuse me. But it's, we can get much more nuanced and layered than that. So this gives you an idea of what an actual financial plan looks like. And of course here, we've just focused on retirement. We could be factoring in, and we do, making major purchases along the way while you're working, switching houses, upgrading your house, buying a second property, saving for your children's our education plans. We absolutely factor that in all the time. Other major purchases, buying a car, all those types of things. You can factor in how you're going to save, where you're going to save along the way. This is what a real financial plan looks like. So here's my question for you. Well, here's my answer first. Do you need a financial plan? Well, unless you've got all these things kind of factored in and running in your head, which none of us do, yes, you want to have a financial plan, because without that, you don't know where you're going and you don't know where you're going to get to, and you have no idea how you're going to get there. You also won't know the perhaps unpleasant surprises that can lie along the way, just like the one example I gave of the big RSP meltdown if you were to pass away before you'd exhausted your RSP. There's lots of ways to plan around that kind of thing. And so that's one reason. The second reason is that statistics have shown, and we're going to talk about this a bit more next week when we look at working with an advisor, but people with a plan do 250% better with their invested assets than people that don't have a plan. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you've invested amount X if that were over time going to grow to $1 million, that amount X with a proper plan instead, statistically, would experience growth that would take it to $2.5 million rather than just $1 million. That's the benefit of having a plan. So I highly encourage you to have a plan. Here's my other question for you, though, to think about. You probably already have some investments. Maybe you've got a small RSP or a tax-free savings account or whatever you've got going on. Here's my question. If you're working, you had to get that somewhere. Unless you are doing it, self-managing it completely yourself, using a Quest Trade or something like that online and just doing it for yourself, you've been paying somebody to supposedly provide you with advice, whether you're buying it over the counter at the bank, which very, very sadly most people do, and the performance there is horrible, primarily because of the lack of planning and also because of the way they plan, which is to protect the bank, not to maximize returns for you. So you've been paying for that advice. It's built into everything. Where's your plan? What's your plan? And if you don't have a plan and you have someone that you've been getting advice from, whether it's over the counter at the bank, whether it's even a robo-advisor, or whether it's full-fledged some type of financial planning person, if you don't have a written plan that you fully understand and you fully know where your finances are going and how you're going to get there, you're paying a lot for something you're not getting, number one, and number two, something that they are actually professionally obligated to provide you, and yet they don't. Now, why is that? Well, that's the blot I was talking about on the financial services industry. Planning takes time, and most advisors would just rather run around getting the next commission check from finding someone else to work with than they would taking the time to work with the client they already have and serve them properly. That's not the way we do things. It's why we're independent. So we're not kind of under the thumb of the larger companies that kind of run a meat grinder operation that only give that kind of service to the very well-off, people with $500,000 or more in assets. And so if you don't have a financial plan, and by the way, many of those people don't have financial plans either, but you need to have a financial plan, and you should have one. And if your advisor isn't capable of producing one that you can fully understand and that maps out all these different nuances and plans, so it optimizes what you're doing with your money and the value you're getting from your work and from the risk you're taking from your investing, then you should be working with someone who does get that for you. So I hope that's been helpful. I'm sure it is for many people. I know it looked like a lot of numbers and can seem a little opaque, but it's not. Honestly, when you sit down and go over those plans, they're the one I showed you, pretty straightforward to understand. Not a lot of jargon, not a lot of nonsense. You can see what the projection is, and then you just have to walk through the plan and update it every year as you go. It's like just setting out on a journey. You plan for a destination, you map out how you're going to get there, and off you go. Now, along the way, there's going to be bumps in the road if you're on the road, or there's going to be prevailing winds if you're flying, and you just keep adjusting your course as you go. Storms are ahead, you steer around the storms. Turbulence comes, you go through it, and you reassess your flight plan as you go. So that's really what you need to do with your finances, because the number one reason is it's going to be very difficult to adjust course when you're 87 years old and you've run out of money, which, by the way, is the number one financial fear of Canadians. So get yourself a planner, an advisor who's got a proper plan for you and is willing to spend the time doing it with you and for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to provide any answers we have, look things up, whatever you need. So again, I want to invite you, join the Simple Plan community. We go through all this stuff there. We walk together, people ask questions. There's all sorts of great fellowship in there as people are trying to find their way to make the most of the finances they've got. I just want to post up one more thing for you here. Today, by the way, we're launching, or relaunching really, our monthly client newsletter. So everyone who's a client of ours receives this email that really looks at what's going on in the markets, what's going on financially and around the world, to help people make sense of what's happening in life financially. Because as we know, we're in very, very interesting times right now. And there's lots to talk about and think about. So I urge you, come on over, join the Simple Plan community. There we go. So you can join it there at facebook.com/groups/Simple Plan community. And I also want to urge you, if you haven't done it already, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter so you can keep up with everything that's going on at the Simple Plan, the events, the opportunities. We put tips in there, all sorts of great stuff. So put that up there again. You just go to go.getthesimpleplan.com/subscribe. That's go.getthesimpleplan.com/subscribe. Just fill out the form there and you'll get subscribed to our newsletter. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Really appreciate it. Next week, as I said, we're going to be looking, it's the last episode in our series. We're going to look at financial advisors. Should I work with one? Why should I work with one? And what should it look like if I do work with one? How can I find a good financial advisor? So thanks very much. Really appreciate you taking the time. And we look forward to being with you again soon.